And thus we have a good inductive argument for the existence of the God of Israel who was proclaimed and revealed by Jesus of Nazareth. Finally, number 7, the personal experience of God. Now this 7th point isn't really an argument for God's existence. Rather, it's the claim that you can know that God exists wholly apart from arguments, simply by personally experiencing Him. This was the way that people in the Bible knew God. As Professor John Hick of Birmingham University explains, and I quote, "God was known to them as a dynamic will interacting with their own wills, a sheer given reality, as inescapably to be reckoned with as destructive storm and life-giving sunshine. They did not think of God as an inferred entity, but as an experienced reality. To them, God was not an idea adopted by the mind, but an experienced reality which gave significance to their lives." Philosophers call beliefs like this properly basic beliefs. They aren't based on some other beliefs. Rather, they're part of the foundations of a person's system of beliefs. Other properly basic beliefs would include things like belief in the reality of the past, the existence of the external world, and the presence of other minds like your own. When you think about it, none of these beliefs can be proved. How could you prove that the world was not created 5 minutes ago with built-in appearances of age, like food in our stomachs from the breakfast we never really ate, or memory traces in our brains of events we never really experienced? How could you prove that you're not a brain in a vat, being stimulated with electrodes by a mad scientist to believe that you're studying here at Imperial College and listening to this lecture right now? How could you prove that the people sitting around you are not really androids who exhibit all of the external behavior of persons with an interior life, but in reality they're just soulless, robot-like entities? Well, although these beliefs are simply basic for us, that doesn't mean that they're arbitrary. Rather, they're grounded in the sense that they are formed in the context of certain experiences. In the experiential context of seeing and feeling and hearing things, I naturally form the belief that there's a world of physical objects around me. And thus my basic beliefs are not arbitrary, but they're grounded in experience. There may be no way to prove such beliefs, but it's perfectly rational to hold them. In fact, you'd have to be crazy to think that you were really a brain in a vat, or that the world was created 5 minutes ago. Such beliefs are not merely basic, they are properly basic. Now, in exactly the same way, God is, for those who know Him personally, a basic belief which is grounded in our experience of God. And we can summarize this consideration as follows. 1, beliefs which are appropriately grounded may be rationally accepted as basic beliefs, not grounded on argument. 2, belief that the biblical God exists is appropriately grounded. 3, therefore, belief that the biblical God exists may be rationally accepted as a basic belief, not grounded on argument. Now, if this is right, then there's a danger that arguments for the existence of God could actually distract one's attention from God Himself. We could become so focused on the external arguments that we fail to hear the inner voice of God speaking to our own hearts. The Bible says, draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. We mustn't so concentrate on the external proofs that we fail to hear the voice of God speaking to our own hearts. For those who do listen, God can become a personal reality in their lives. So, in summary, we've seen 7 features of the world around us that point beyond the world to its ground in a transcendent reality. Number 1, why anything at all exists. Number 2, the origin of the universe. Number 3, the fine-tuning of the universe for intelligent life. Number 4, the existence of objective moral values and duties in the world. Number 5, the very possibility of God's existence. Number 6, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And number 7, the immediate personal experience of God. Is the material world all there is? Well, I think on the basis of the 7 reasons that I presented, we have a powerful cumulative case for thinking that the answer is no.
Thank you very much, Professor Craig, for coming and sharing with us today. Just before we go, I was wondering, you've given us a lot to think about. You've given us these 7 arguments. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind telling everyone which your favorite of these arguments is, which you think is the most powerful argument of the 7.
My doctoral work at the University of Birmingham was done on the second argument, the cosmological argument, based on the finitude of the past, the beginning of the universe. And I continue to find this to be such a powerful and engaging argument. And so, although I realize that I think it may not be the most existentially gripping argument, it is and remains for me the most important argument for God's existence.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If you have to go to lectures now, please enjoy your afternoon, and thank you for watching on the internet. We've got a first question here, so would you like to ask your question for Professor Craig?
Hello, my question is that there have been prophets around the Middle East and telling about God. So how come in China or Australia, other places in the world, have there not been prophets saying the same thing, that there is one God? Why is only one place? God should influence all the people of the world rather than just one place.
I'll repeat the question for those who couldn't hear it. He points out that in the Middle East, and particularly in the Jewish tradition, there have been prophets sent by God to communicate His message to mankind. Why aren't there similar prophets sent by God in China or Latin America or some place of that sort? And I would answer the question from a biblical perspective in the following way. The New Testament says that God has both a general revelation of Himself, which is available to all mankind, no matter where and when they live, and then there's a special revelation of God, which He has made to Israel and through that tradition culminating in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. God's general revelation to all mankind is through nature and conscience. What comes to expression in the cosmological and moral arguments that I've discussed today, so that all persons everywhere at any time in history can know that there's a creator God of the universe, and they can sense their moral responsibility to this person or this being. And that general revelation is available everywhere. But God, through His special revelation of Israel, has sought to reveal Himself in such a way, culminating in the person of Jesus, that this message will eventually then be proclaimed throughout the world and will be made available to all persons. But by the very nature of a historical revelation, this is a process that begins at a particular geographical locale and time and then spreads throughout the world. And so you have a difference between general and special revelation. Yes?
How come you cannot, how does a person know there's only one God rather than several gods?
Well, I think through God's revelation in nature, you can sense that there is a creator of everything that exists. And so monotheism, I think, would be the simpler default position. In fact, the New Testament says that people refusing to recognize the creator of the universe begin to worship objects that are made in the image of animals and beasts and human beings and so forth, so that this kind of idolatry and polytheism really represents a kind of degeneration from refusing to accept the general revelation of the creator of the universe.
You said that only a finite number of multiverses would have been generated by now, so that you wouldn't have every possibility, but is that not based on the idea that the multiverses are coming from somewhere with time. If there was no time before the universe, then they all exist. They don't exist on a basis of starting now and ending.
Well, on the contrary, I think what I indicated is the Born-Guth-Vilenkin theorem applies not only to our universe, but it applies to the whole ensemble, the whole multiverse. It had to have an absolute beginning, so it has a finite age. It has only existed for a finite amount of time. And therefore, the only way you could get an infinite number of universes in the ensemble would be if it's spatially infinite. But if these are generated, say, a few at a time, then given its finite past, there's no guarantee that there are an infinite number of these things.
But I'm talking about each universe is contained in itself. Outside of our universe, then for another universe, they're not in a space-time. They exist independently, not in a space-time, so they can't start at a specific time or occupy a certain space.
Well, that depends on what sort of multiverse model you adopt. What I'm thinking of here would be the type of model that thinks of a sort of mother universe, which is in expansion and it's in a false vacuum state, and there appear bubbles in it of true vacuum that percolate throughout this expanding false vacuum. And so these are in a kind of wider reality. That's the most plausible and popular multiverse scenario that's scientifically out there today. Okay, we should go to your second question so others can have a chance.
How do you objectively measure the morals that are objective? How do you know that you're not measuring a biological moral and you know that it's objective?
Right, that's the support for the second premise, that objective moral duties and values exist. And what I would do here is simply appeal to your moral experience. Don't you think, as you reflect on it, that certain things are genuinely evil, for example? Don't you think that it's wrong to torture a little child for fun, as opposed to loving that little child? Don't you think that that is a more plausible account of your moral experience than just saying, well, this is just a biological spin-off of social and biological evolution? So it's kind of like belief in the external world of objects. This is a properly basic belief grounded in your experience. And unless you're given some sort of a defeater for it, you've got no reason to deny what experience teaches you. In the one case that there is a world of physical objects, in the other that there's an objective moral realm. So again, I'll leave it up to you. Which do you think is more plausible? Do you think that there are objective values and duties? If you do, then I think you should believe that God exists.
Well, I would just argue that there's no distinguishing between them, and that just because one maybe seems preferable, you prefer to think that rape is objectively bad, doesn't necessarily mean that it's objectively bad, and it's not because of biological and social advantages to thinking that. I would say
well, I would just be repeating myself here at this point. I see no reason to think such a thing and to deny what my moral experience tells me.